And now today's featured speaker is Sterling Hawkins, class of 2004. Sterling is an internationally recognized thought leader and top-rated keynote speaker on innovation, transformational leadership, and exponential growth. In 2004, Sterling co-founded, launched, and sold his first technology company, Convena, where he developed innovative approaches to beat competition, handle high growth, and achieve performance in the retail industry. He then went on to be involved with the launch, growth, or investment in over 50 companies. He's the co-founder of CART, a platform to drive adoption of emerging technologies at Fortune 500 companies. In addition to mentoring technology startups and speaking at forums across the globe, including ours today, Sterling is a certified yoga teacher and adventure seeker. Without further ado, please join me in virtually welcoming Sterling Hawkins. Thank you, Sterling.
Thank you, Emily. That's great. And good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be with you. It's been so long since I've had a chance to get back to Bentley. It's kind of amazing to be back, at least in a virtual way, and talk with some of you guys. I know we've got the chat feature, at least I think we've got the chat feature working. So what would be great is just to hear from some of you, if you're in Boston, or type in the chat box what city you're in. I'm out here in Los Angeles, and well, I don't think you could get much farther from Boston. Tampa, South Carolina, Quincy, New York, Lima, wow. London, Newton, Portland, Boston, Buffalo. That's close to where I grew up. I grew up in Central New York. Waltham, of course. Well, fantastic. Well, welcome all of you, and thanks for being here. Now, I would, if I was with you in person and I could see you, ask everybody to raise their hand if you've been a little bit disrupted by 2020 so far, but I'm pretty sure that's just about everybody at this point. You know, the world feels more unpredictable than ever. And the question is, at least today, how do we still realize breakthrough results, or at least some positive change, lasting positive change during this time of disruption? Now, I don't know about you, but I've found really deep backlogs of shows on Netflix. Some I didn't even know exist over the last several months. And, others I found that I used to watch when I was a kid. And I was like, oh, well, let me check these out. And we all had shows that we liked when we were kids, didn't we? Me, I was into MacGyver. You know, the guy that could improvise his way out of anything. And let me just see, I've got to make sure these slides are working here, because can you see if you can advance that slide, because it's not going forward? So I'm sure most of you have seen MacGyver, but every single Sunday, 9 p.m., I remember it like it was yesterday, I'm on the couch kind of waiting for the show to start. And every single Sunday, there's no situation he couldn't free himself from, right? Every single Sunday, I'm just blown away. No obstacle he couldn't overcome. And just when you think it's over, like this must be the end, he'd use chewing gum and a paperclip to stop a speeding train. Pretty amazing, right? It's the obvious solution. And he'd do this week after week. He'd be in a life and death situation where he innovates or he dies. He never died. Now, maybe inspired by MacGyver for the last 17 years, I've been working with companies and their teams to innovate. And as Emily mentioned, right out of undergrad, I started a company I sold to a group in the Bay Area that went on to raise $550 million before going bankrupt. That's a story I'll have to tell you over drinks sometimes. And I learned a few things there. I went on to spend my career focused on understanding, well, what does it take to create exponential growth? First for my companies and my investments, and then eventually for companies like Mitsubishi and Kraft Heinz and United Nations. And this is actually a picture of one of the last in-person workshops we were able to run, at least prior to all these stay-at-home orders. Now, in my work, I've started to look at innovation differently. More broadly than I think you typically hear about it. I look at innovation as defined as a significant positive change. Now that could be technological, obviously, but that could also be in your career, your finances, even your relationships. The key to it is it's not just a little better version of what we already have. It's meaningful. It's transformational. It's even exponential change for the better. And about 3 years ago, after working with hundreds of startups, big companies, all these different groups, I made this discovery. It's not about money. It's not about who you know. It's not even about being in the right place at the right time. It's about discomfort. It takes embracing, not just accepting discomfort, maybe even an actual emergency, to innovate. It's on the other side of that pain, that uneasiness, that anxiousness, even embarrassment, that breakthrough innovation is waiting. And these days, I think we're feeling that more than ever. Now, MacGyver knew that, right? 7 years old, I'm watching a rerun, I think it was season 1, episode 7. It was called Last Stand. And in it, MacGyver's locked in a commercial freezer by none other than the bad guys. So imagine you're MacGyver. You know, try it on right now. You're sitting looking at your computer, but you're MacGyver, trust me. What do? Well, you've got minutes to live. So you break off a piece of the rack from around the freezer. You line it up between the light and the door lock, and you use the light to melt ice down the rack into the door lock, expanding as it freezes, breaking the door open. You did it again, right? This is what MacGyver did. These moments are what made him famous. Now, we're probably not going to find ourselves trapped in a commercial freezer, although you know what to do now if you are. But being trapped in a freezer has to be pure discomfort, right? And life, like I said, especially these days, gives us discomfort. But it's also a chance for our own MacGyver moment. Now, take somebody like Elon Musk, right? This is one of the most successful men on earth. Just sent humans up in a commercial space flight up, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, right? He started out when he sold PayPal for about $180 million. And he said, okay, well, I'm going to put $100 million into SpaceX, $70 million into Tesla, and $10 million into Solar City. He had to borrow money for rent, seriously. And now they're all incredibly successful companies, you know, literally changing what's possible in the world. So he took that discomfort, right? That discomfort of sleeping on a friend's couch when he just sold PayPal for $180 million because he invested all his money, and turned it into success. He did it by purposefully locking himself in what I would call a metaphorical freezer. He didn't give himself a choice. He forced himself to have a MacGyver moment. Now, real MacGyver-like discomfort is career risking, image risking, definitely reputation risking discomfort. It creates this opportunity for transformational innovation, personally and professionally. Look at it as the magnitude of risk is proportional to the breakthrough potential. Take somebody like Malala, who was repeatedly threatened and even shot by the Taliban in Afghanistan for her activism. She's now innovating access to education in the Middle East for women and throughout the world. That's discomfort. And discomfort is our access to innovation. They're our own MacGyver moments. Now, not only are MacGyver moments highly uncomfortable to do, obviously, right? They can even be uncomfortable to watch. I mean, a person willing to break the status quo with everything they are and everything they're not on the line, it's insane. But when you back up and you see somebody stand up for a cause that's bigger than their own discomfort, well, that's inspiring. I mean, it's moving. It's what people mean when they talk about leading from the front. They're speaking about putting themselves on the line for significant positive gain, innovation for the group. Just look at the leadership that Malala, Musk, and even people from history like Lincoln and Gandhi have provided. Now, it's not a totally new idea. I mean, you've heard it definitely someplace before. Plato said that necessity is the mother of invention. Edison said that discontent is the first necessity of progress. But I really knew I was onto something with this idea from something my mom said. Now, whether you are a parent or have parents, sometimes parents say these funny things that may mean something to them, but nothing to the kids. And my mom was no different. She used to say things like, well, it's cheaper to milk a cow than buy one. What? Or don't take any wooden nickels. I still really don't know what that means. And the way out is through. I think that was actually Robert Frost now, but for me, it'll always be my mom. And it's that one that makes so much sense to me now. In order to get through something, to get out of the freezer situations in our lives, those hard things, the things we want to change, we need a MacGyver moment. Now, I was in this exact position several years ago. No job, out of cash, anxious in public, girlfriend broke up with me. It's something that most people call rock bottom or maybe a country song. It was that bad. And one day I'm sitting at the computer at my parents' house, which is where you live when you hit rock bottom. And I got one of these general email blasts about a conference in Singapore. And that thing my mom said pops into my head, the way out is through. Not having anything beyond an idea. I was terrified to speak in public at this point, by the way. Few qualifications and everything else. I emailed them back cold and I said, well, why don't you have me speak? Best, Sterling. Now, I end up getting on the phone with the conference director and not having anything to lose, literally nothing. I negotiate a fee to speak at their conference. Now, upon reflection, I had locked myself in a freezer. Right? I committed to something that was making me highly uncomfortable, and I had to innovate myself. So I wrote a speech and developed a deck and practiced and rewrote and practiced again and again and again. And when I finally gave the closing keynote of that conference, it was the highest rated of the entire show. Now, I'm not sure they were in the same keynote I was in, but the conference director ended up linking me up with a recommendation and an introduction to all of his conference director friends. And today, purely as a result of locking myself in that proverbial freezer and going through something that was extraordinarily uncomfortable, I get to speak around the world, at least virtually these days. And I've got a company that produces breakthrough innovation for businesses and organizations of all types. Now, COVID-19 has produced a kind of discomfort for all of us, wouldn't you say? Now, let me show you how this works. And we'll start with something really hard so you can work backwards into your situation. I'm, of course, always happy to help. And Emily and the team here can share my email and contact information. But if we want to use the comments again real quick, what industry do you think was hardest hit by the pandemic? Do you have any guesses? Hospitality, restaurants, leisure, retail. Yeah. Well, parenting. Yeah. I love that. Definitely parenting. I'm hearing from a lot of friends about that. Travel, yes. Yeah, well, according to Forbes, number 3 is airlines, number 2 is hotels, and number 1, a couple of you had it, restaurants. 40 of 52 states at some point banned dine-in service. I'm sure there's takeout, but that's a whole different thing. And most of us now, we're not buying from restaurants anywhere near what we were buying before. I mean, I can tell you just personally, I am more familiar with my local supermarket and how to buy online from them than ever before in history. And I come out of the retail world. So restaurant sales almost overnight are down 47%. 7 out of 10 operators lay off many of their employees. $25 billion in sales and 3 million jobs evaporate overnight. Now, I don't know how many of you are OpenTable users. I certainly was, and I was doing some research around this. And their reservations hit near zero globally back, I think it was beginning of April. And it's just incredible to look at that chart. I mean, that's led to 3% of restaurants closing permanently, and forecasts as many as 60% of them will close and never, ever reopen. It is just a totally different world. And as you look at that from whatever industry or business you're in, unless you're in restaurants already, you probably wouldn't pick now as a time to open a restaurant, would you? I mean, it seems like a pretty grim place, right? And that's just the way it is. Unless you're this guy, Eric Rivera, owner of a restaurant called Addo. Now, they're based in downtown Seattle, one of the hardest hit places, early on at least, by COVID-19 in the States. And what's tougher is that Addo is a restaurant that really specializes in tasting menus and experiences, really focusing on what happens to you as a diner in their location. And now, just like everybody else, he's forced to close his doors to in-restaurant dining. Now, instead of rolling over and just waiting until things got back to normal, that's used to be what we think. I don't know if things will ever go back to normal now. But back in March, April, Eric got to work. He embraced that discomfort. He thought he could, well, maybe challenge any assumptions about what restaurants were supposed to do or what they could do during this time. Now, he couldn't change the laws. He couldn't solve for COVID-19 himself, obviously. So the question became, how do you work with the same constraints, the same limits, the same discomfort that all these restaurants and other restaurant owners are in to have a breakthrough? Well, he sat back and at first he took to social media, the online world. The obvious step probably would have been, well, let me make sure that I'm on Uber Eats and Amazon food delivery and promote with discounts, because that's what nearly every restaurant did. But Eric didn't do that. Instead, he went entirely the opposite direction. He started further limiting what people could get from his restaurant. He started raising the prices, limited time offers, limited products, limited tasting menus, all promoted out through social media. He launched things like a spa day, a special home menu, all for limited time. Special Japanese beef night, he had wine pairings, and some of these things would just be available for one night or a couple of days a week. And this is all direct. He's not working with any third parties. And when people got over that initial shock, I think we all went through in the year, probably mid-March, they realized, hey, there's something special going on here. And they started to order. And not just order, but tell their friends, and Eric kept going. He put together a special subscription service. It would give you 3 chef-selected meals with minimal prep and a bottle of wine, which, I think most of us probably needed 2 a week. But what about his wait staff? Well, he had this business ethic where he didn't want to let anybody go. But how could a restaurant not let their wait staff go? There's no in-restaurant dining anymore. So even prior to any of the government payroll protection plans or anything else, he looked for new solutions again. And in this case, he said, well, instead of having our servers deliver food to the tables, what if we have them deliver food to the customers' homes? In fact, what if we create an entire delivery program, not based on Uber Eats or Amazon or anybody else, but we make our own safety protocols, our own special commercial vehicles to have delivery in an entirely new way. And it worked. They went so far as not only keeping all of their staff, but they ended up hiring people because they were growing so quickly. Now, they got into other channels as well. They started shipping things. You could stock your pantry with different things. You could order some of the meats and spices and wines that they had. They expanded delivery across the US. He even found time to give back. He started a food donation program for some of the people that were hungry in Seattle and needed it most, especially during the beginning of the pandemic. And the question is, well, where has that left him? Sure, he's done some things. He embraced that discomfort. He did things that nobody else was doing. Well, today, they're doing more business than ever before in history. Still with their doors closed, at least last I heard, they're delivering and shipping more product than even in the best of times. And as I said, not only did they not let anybody go, they've been hiring people to keep up with demand. Slightly different than most restaurants, right? Now, again, this is one of the hardest hit industries because of the pandemic. Could not be worse. And if you look at it, you say, well, if that could happen with a restaurant during COVID-19, what can we do in our businesses with our people and our resources? At least if we think about it in the right way. Now, I don't have tons of time to get into this, but I want to share it as a resource. Now, thinking like what Eric did at Addo is deep in some of the systems that we bring to different businesses. And I figured since I'm a Bentley alumni, I should share it here. There's a very specific way to approach these things, to create those kinds of breakthroughs, to put yourself in that metaphorical freezer, to at least think about creating these breakthrough results. Now, you can download this worksheet or take a screenshot of it. You can find it at sterlinghawkins.com/thewaythrough. And you can do it now if I'm talking, if you want to download it and check it out. But there are really 4 steps. The first is understanding and, importantly, articulating the limit. What is it that you're bumping up against? It could be one thing, or it could be everything that you're bumping up against. Then you look at, okay, well, why is that a limit? Is it a personal preference? Is it a law? Is it a company ethic? Is it a monetary constraint, right? What is it that's holding you back? What's the source of that discomfort? And then 3, consider what you really want, what the ultimate goal is. Now, it's not about money at this step. It would be what the money buys you, right? So in the case of Eric and Addo, what their ultimate goal was probably to service customers, to get some of their really good, high quality food and experiences in front of the people that could eat it. And the 4th step is speculate on what else is possible, right? How can you achieve that same result, but in a very different way? And it's just, like I said, a framework to start to think through some of these things to create some of those breakthrough results. It takes you from the obvious answer, at least in the restaurant world, to go to Uber Eats and Amazon delivery and promote with discounts, into the world of Addo, where all of a sudden you're going the other direction and having breakout growth better than even before. The thing with all of this is that we're all capable of doing these kinds of things, especially you guys, since we all went to Bentley. But the thing is, we don't. Because who chooses to be uncomfortable? So we generally wait. We wait for the bad guys to lock us in that freezer. In our lives, we do things like we wait until we have a heart attack to do something about our health. Or we wait until we see that new startup idea and we're like, I had that idea. Or these days we wait until we permanently close our doors because of COVID-19 to realize, I could have done something else. Avoiding discomfort is the only thing that's standing between kind of the linear incremental results that we plan on and that great quote, living up to your potential. The thing is, avoiding discomfort too long never works anyways, for people or companies. Kodak found that out the hard way. And I know I'm going way back with the reference here, but they hung their hat on print photography, even though they invented the first digital camera. They refused to embrace the discomfort that was necessary organizationally, culturally within their business that was required to bring that to market, at least until digital camera companies left them behind. The best part about all of this is that it's not just my opinion. It's grounded in biology. See, our brains have evolved to keep us safe, which from an evolutionary standpoint is genius. Avoid the things that are dangerous and we survive. But we've also evolved to feel discomfort during periods of perceived stress. And when we embrace that stress versus run from it, the body's sympathetic nervous system uses that stress differently. Sure, the heart might race and blood surges and adrenaline courses through our veins. We all know that feeling. But what's happening is that new connections are made in the brain. It's in fact the biological equivalent of opening up the throttle on an engine. And it's why under conditions of extreme competition, typical discomfort, by the way, athletes can improve by as much as 12% above where they train. Now, we could talk about discomfort and innovation all day, and I do. I used to do them in physical workshops. These days, it's all online. I spend more time in front of the camera today than I could even ever imagine. But if we did that, it'd just add to our seemingly limitless knowledge potential. There have never been so many podcasts, audiobooks, paper books, digital books, e-courses, school courses, certifications, and everything else as there are today. And those things are important. But if you think about it, has knowledge alone ever made the difference? Maybe better said, has knowledge without new action ever made the difference? No. Knowledge without action doesn't create breakthroughs. It would be like MacGyver sitting at his desk, listening to the latest podcast on lockpicking, reading a book about the physics of water and heat, and maybe trolling the internet looking for the latest tactics of bad guys. He'd have a lot of knowledge, but that knowledge alone doesn't get him anything. There's no discomfort, no opportunity for innovation. But when he embraces the discomfort of being locked in a freezer, disparate ideas that would probably never have the chance to come together do. It's exactly because he's in an uncomfortable position that the knowledge and action come together. It crosses over into this world of the unknown, the complex, the unseen chaos of potential that's all around us to create something entirely new. Innovation. Now, this example seems especially appropriate these days. And in August 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King was standing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, already representing something incredibly unpopular at the time, the civil rights movement. What you might not know is that the authorities called him in the days prior, and they said, Martin, you have to give a different speech. If you don't, it'll incite riots and we'll arrest you again. He agreed. He agreed to give a different speech. But thankfully for him and thankfully for all of us, he had his friend and famous gospel singer on stage with him that day. So as he's giving a different speech, she's behind him. Her name's Mahalia Jackson. And she says, Martin, tell them about your dream. He actually ignores her several times. You can hear her in the recording, and it's the third time when she says, Martin, tell them about your dream. The next 4 words out of his mouth, we all know because we live inside of that innovation today. He said, I have a dream. Now, how we tend to look at constraints and hardships and problems as something to rid ourselves from. We tend to look at something to overcome or to avoid. Well, we all have dreams. And realizing those dreams takes embracing our own discomfort. Innovation, a lasting positive change of any sort, requires exactly the opposite of running away from that discomfort, running away from the fear. It requires going through those things to get to the other side. Now, I assure you, after working with thousands of companies and people, we all have that capacity. In fact, I'll take it a step further. I think most of us know what those things are. You know, it could be something as simple as calling a relative, bringing an idea to your boss, starting that business, reopening your doors, whatever it is, we know what it is, at least the first thing. And, you know, my mom said the way out is through. And today I'd invite all of you to go through. Become the kind of person that looks for the hard things, the things other people avoid, to find your MacGyver moments and become an innovator. Because it's really innovators, especially these days, that change our businesses. And it's innovators that change our lives. And it's innovators who might even change the world. Something we need now more than ever. So that's all I've got for you, Emily. If we want to get into a couple of questions, I think we've got time for that. But this has been a blast.
Great, thank you. Well, now I know how to become an innovator, and I will agree with the person who said that parenting has seen innovation.
That's my favorite.
That was a good one. That was a good one. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box, but we'll start with one that was pre-submitted. So our first question for you, Sterling, is change handled, or maybe in your opinion, should it be handled the same way, whether it's a global issue or an individual personal challenge?
I think it is, because the thing about change, at least any significant change, is that our brains aren't built for understanding what that is. If you think about like an exponential graph, if it was a road, you can't see around that corner. It could change too quickly. We're just not designed to think that drastically. So I think the constructs to create change, to work towards change, are exactly the same, whether you're doing it as an individual or doing it as a company. And so the question is, what are the right systems or constructs or constraints to put into place to give you those kinds of positive results?
Great. And next question.
Yeah.
Can you talk about communication and accountability in this changing culture and how to use it?
Yeah. Well, I think there's two ways to respond to change. One is be it the effects of it, right? And let's go back to the restaurant example where you're kind of ducking and running for cover, where you say, okay, well, let's get up on Uber Eats and Amazon delivery and let's do discounts and let's kind of do the safe approach that everybody else is doing, because nobody can fault you for that. The other piece is to say, okay, well, I maybe didn't choose that change. Nobody picked COVID-19, but we're going to embrace that change, embrace the discomfort, because change is uncomfortable no matter how you look at it. And we're going to do something about it. We're going to make it our choice to go that direction. And accountability is tricky because it works very similar to that. You know, when it's something that you're subject to, it's harder to perform and operate versus choosing to be accountable for something. So I think it's very important in the conversations you're having with anybody. You know, it could be your coworkers, it could be your family, it could be your friends, to make sure that we're talking about accountability in a way that empowers the other people, that empowers ourselves, versus something that becomes limiting or kind of is the albatross holding somebody down. And that's the trick of the whole thing. I would say it's critical to have big breakthrough growth, but it's also critical to think about it the right way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And one of our final questions, it looks like here, we don't have too many submitted, so I will, maybe this will be our last one.
Yeah.
People who are interested in starting their own companies, or who perhaps have started down this journey, they understand there's a lot of priorities in starting a company. What is your recommendation for where to start first?
Well, I think you've got some idea of what you want to do is the most important thing. And, you know, I go into it understanding that that vision of what you ultimately want it to be will probably change, but having it written or articulated somewhere is extremely important. So you have something to change from, right? Oftentimes we'll, at least me, and I don't think I'm unique in this regard, like I've got all the ideas in my head, like, oh, we need to do this, and here's my different priorities, and then we're gonna go start to do them. And what that means is every day when I get up in the morning, I don't have any kind of compass to make sure I'm going in the right direction from the day before. So as you can have that direction written down, especially starting out, it gives you something to go back to say, okay, this is what the original vision was. This is where we want to go. And either I need to align what I'm doing today with that vision to make sure we're going in that direction, or it gives you a chance to very consciously and meaningfully change that vision and say, okay, well, I thought that 6 weeks ago because, well, I hadn't really done anything. I was just starting this thing out. But now, 6 weeks into it, I've taken a bunch of actions. I, filed the legal paperwork. Maybe I've called some clients. I've talked to friends and family. Maybe I even have a first customer. Well, now I see it's actually, I need to turn this thing 30 degrees to the right. And that's okay to do, just so long as you've got that kind of center line. And then I think that's important, not just starting a company, but a company of any size.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully everyone who's been listening today has been inspired to create that roadmap and get comfortable with the discomfort and go out there and make a positive change. Do you have any final words for our audience today, Sterling?
Yeah, I just say, first, thank you, Emily. Thank you to Bentley for having me on here. It's great to be back with you guys. And if I can be helpful to anybody individually or any companies, feel free to reach out and send me an email. My email is sterling@sterlinghawkins.com. I'd be more than happy to, lend my perspective on different things. And I'd love to kind of be part of this Bentley movement of creating some breakout results for all of us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sterling. Please get in touch as he recommended. Take him up on his offer. And we're so honored to have you join us again today. Thank you to everybody who joined us. Have a wonderful afternoon, evening, wherever you are, since you're all over the globe.